Dan. Hi, everyone. Happy Saturday morning. I'm going to try to go kind of quick because it's way too nice for us all to be behind a computer today. I'm also really glad that Dan and I are doing this together. We were talking before because as a designer, I'm kind of like pretty over here, and he's like the edible expert. So he can be like, yeah, this is a good combination. So I think together, hopefully, we'll be able to give you some ideas. One of the things that I find in gardening in general, and I think especially with edible gardening, is that there's an intimidation factor. And I feel like with edible gardening, there's this sense that you need to, clear out a whole section of the garden and have these cute little rows of like lettuce or whatever. And that seems like a massive commitment. And I think sometimes that can turn people off from it. So what I want to encourage you today, and I hope the takeaway is to really think about your garden differently in the sense of, looking at it and how you can integrate edibles in it. It's really good for everybody when you do that. It's good for the edibles, it's good for the pollinators. It's, there's a good reason behind sort of mixing edibles in with your perennial garden and whatnot. Okay, so diving in, I have to say something really quick about companion planting. Companion planting is a whole concept, it's a whole thing. It deserves its own class, which we're actually going to have in June 15th with Joan Pont. So definitely come back to that. But the basic idea of companion planting is combining plants in ways that produce extra benefits for one or both. So it's a type of integrated pest management. The thing is when you have multiple different or a variety of plants, then you create more of a natural ecosystem. So you have natural, predator insects that can come and kill off the the bad bugs and whatnot. And so we create more of an ecosystem. I think it's prettier, to have flowers in with your edibles and stuff like that. So that's a term. You can definitely deep dive into that. But check out, I did send a handout in the resource in the link that you would have gotten. So check out some of the ideas on companion planting and our webinar that we'll have in June with Joan. She's great. Okay, in terms of planning, how you're going to integrate edibles into your garden, definitely take account of the environment and the conditions. I mean, this is just the first step, just in general, when you're designing your garden. So we want to know, sun exposure, how much water is it getting? What's your soil like? Is there wind? What do you have in your existing landscape? And, is it perennial or annual? When I design a garden, I'm always looking to create a space that has year-round interest, but has a foundation to it or a backbone. So you want to have stuff that's evergreen, and then you want to have that perennial color or the perennial edible or whatnot. So then you create more interest along throughout the seasons. So sun exposure, we like to consider full sun as sort of like 5 hours or more. The meat of the sun is at the middle of the day from like 11 until 3:30 or 4. And so that's when that if you have that amount of sun, then you'll be able to plant, your peppers and your tomatoes and the stuff that needs a lot more sun. Herbs like rosemary and lavender and things like that. That's going to be the sunspot. And then if it's less than that, then we can consider stuff like your leafy greens, lettuces, kale, chard, spinach, arugula, all of that is good. And even things like blueberries. Blueberries are related to rhododendrons. And so they take the same conditions as them. And so you can combine blueberries in with your rhododendrons, and that can be a thing. So take account of the sun. Water, if it is an existing landscape, think about what is getting more water and how you're going to integrate your edibles with it. For example, in this picture here, this is not a garden I designed. There's a lawn that's going up to this patio. So the lawn typically gets more water than a lot of established shrubs. So a lawn, you could consider doing edibles that would like more water. So things like lettuces would be a cute border, or chard or any of that could go along a lawn space, and that would be compatible with the amount of water. Soil is definitely a big factor. It all starts with soil, and so you want to be sure that the soil is amended no matter what you plant. Oh, Dan,
I have a question.
yeah.
Okay, so I've got this lawn. Uh, how do I plant lettuce in a lawn? Are you saying,
Oh,
I bet what you're saying is I could take an edge off of the lawn, right?
yeah, you definitely, or like if you look at it, there's this border here, there's some emptiness in the border where the edging is there. So you could fill in the dirt spots, like in the bottom right hand corner next to the lawn there.
Okay,
Yeah,
and that little planting bed there is probably getting some overspray from the lawn sprinklers.
totally.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I like this one. I like this picture too, because this is a grapevine growing over this arbor here. So, I mean, you can consider edibles for a vine over an arbor, and that's super cute. I think that it makes the garden interesting if you incorporate these edible, sort of in these little pockets here and there. It When people come over and they look at your garden, they're like, "Oh my gosh, that's a grapevine. That's so cool." Or that's a blueberry over there. It's interesting. It gives it a little bit more function than just like pretty shrubs. Um, Okay, yeah, and amending the soil. Wind is also a factor. So just take that into consideration. I don't, if it's a super windy spot, then maybe you put in an olive tree. It's not like anything like tomatoes and stuff like that really like wind, but definitely take account of it and just put that into information that you'd be gathering about your space. An existing landscape, like I said, look at what you have and the water requirements and the sun requirements. Like I was saying, the rhododendron, that's a good example of what you can combine with that. More acidic stuff. And so just take into account your existing landscape and if it's annual or perennial. Annual is one season and it's completed its life cycle. Perennial is many seasons, so it goes year after year. So you can leave a space in your garden for annual vegetable planting or annual flower planting, which I find kind of nice because then it changes out a couple times a year. It gives a fresh look. You can, have fun with different vegetables and color, and try different stuff at different years. So, okay. So I wrote this sentence and I was trying to make this simple, and I think it just made it a little bit more complicated when I read it over this morning. But what I was imagining is if you're going to incorporate edibles in your garden, you sort of create this list of what sort of edibles you want to grow. So that's one list. And then you create this list of sort of zones you need to fill. Like, do you need a tree? Do you need a shrub? Do you want some color or whatever? And then we're able to take these two lists and sort of draw lines to where one thing would work for whatever. I hope that makes sense. Okay. And so taking into account, like I said before, like the environmental conditions and whatnot, then let's look at the function. So do we want something for the border? Do we want a tree? Do we want a hedge or shrub? Is it an annual or perennial? So let's pick that apart. Border. There's a lot of different borders you can do. And again, taking account of your sun, the amount of sun exposure you get. But the time, for example, this is a time border, this bottom left, that's an evergreen border plant, edible and full sun. And then the chives next to it on the bottom right, that's pretty much evergreen as well and full to part sun. And then the top two is looks like a kale and a viola. So these are more part sun. The viola is an edible flower, and so you can put it in salads and stuff. So think about, like I said, like what you want to incorporate. These are just a few examples. There's a lot of other ones too, but just thinking of it in terms of function, I think is important. Okay, tree. Do you want to incorporate a tree? I think in the Bay Area, our go-to tree typically is a citrus. I don't know, maybe that's just me thinking that, but everybody wants a citrus, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But there's other edible trees, of course. So I mean, you can incorporate olives. I actually this top right, the top the tree on the right side is called an espalier fruit tree. So that's a term where the tree has been trained to be flat against a wall. It's like a vine. I'll show this on a few slides down, but I try to use this semi regularly in gardens because I think it's such a cool um, uh, artistic sort of ad. It's really architectural against a wall. It's fun. People don't expect it. Um, and so you can do something fun and not take up a ton of space, but have that tree against the wall. And some of these apple trees that we get, the espalier ones, they'll have a different variety of apple on each little branch there. And so that's kind of fun too. What do you think, Dan?
I think they're great fun. And just to point out, usually it's apples and pears
Mhm.
that are used because of the way they make the fruit. You don't have to prune them for fruit production. You can just prune them for how they look. So you can, as opposed to say a peach or a plum, which you have to prune in a different way in order for it to keep making fruit well. So apples and pears are the usual espaliers, although you can also do oddball things like pomegranates, uh,
Yeah.
and
Citrus too, I've seen.
you can do citrus. It's a little more challenging because of the branches tend to try to grow really upright in citrus. So it's a little challenging to bend them into the right shape,
Mm.
but certainly can be done. Yeah, I like them.
I do too. Um, okay, so and then shrubs or hedges. Dan and I were talking about this before. He hasn't seen it in person. I have, but you can do citrus hedges, and that's kind of a cool idea, you know. So again, just thinking about in your garden, what what sort of function do you need to like fill with whatever plant you're adding, and can an edible plant be used? So citrus, you could do a citrus hedge. That's the top left. On the bottom left is a pineapple guava. And I think that it's an underutilized plant, honestly. I think it's beautiful. It can be a great hedge. You get fruit from it. It has a super pretty flower. It's evergreen. So just thinking about what you can plug in that will help fulfill that function. Obviously, rosemary, a lot of us like to use. That can be a nice sort of medium hedge, and lavender is sort of a medium to low hedge. So again, as you're going through and you're designing your edible garden, just thinking about what you can use for what function. And like I said before, annual or perennial, like so the top left picture is of pole beans. Pole beans are super fun and really cute to grow. You can do, you can have them along a fence, or you can create little teepees that can be a fun add to your garden. But just sort of keeping in mind that that plant, that space it's gonna die down after the season. So just planning that in terms of your placement and thinking about what will come after that. Just so you're constantly keeping that space looking full and having something going on. The bottom left is a parsley hedge, and I'm obsessed with parsley hedges. I've done them several times in gardens, and it's got such a yummy green look to it, like a really lush look, but you can eat it too. And so you can think about parsley, incorporating parsley. Parsley can go, I don't know, maybe Dan will say this better, but I would say parsley can go for a couple of seasons. It's just a matter of how you prune it. It can keep leafing back out. And so keeping that looking fresh is nice. And then the right picture is oregano. And so that's just another example of something that is perennial. It can definitely go year after year. It's just a matter of pruning. Okay. So this is a garden. Oh, did you want to say something?
Well, I'm curious about the parsley. How tall was that? It's hard to tell in the picture. So how
Well,
big hedge are you making?
so the picture that's up now, if you look close towards the back of it, the all the way like at the end of the lawn,
Yeah.
we did two espalier fruit trees. So I did this garden. So we did two espalier fruit trees, and then we did a parsley hedge in front of it. So can you see like the difference between sort of that green row and the grass? That's all
It,
parsley.
it looks maybe 18 inches.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, maybe
Yeah.
a little bit smaller. Yeah,
Yeah.
16
Okay.
or
And
so.
was that flat leaf parsley or curly? I couldn't tell from the
Curly. I like the curly.
that was curly. Okay.
I,
Well, I
yeah,
mean they both grow about the same height. And parsley is what we call a biennial. So it just grows like crazy the first year. And then in the second year, it wants to flower. It'll still grow up. It'll just make all these white flowers, and then it'll drop a bunch of seeds and usually reseed itself. So you can kind of end up with a perennial hedge because it'll just keep coming. So yeah,
yeah,
that's like a great way to grow parsley. Uh,
I love it. And I think I just like the curly leaf because it has a little bit more texture to it, I guess, than the flat leaf. But I'm sure, I mean, you can do flat leaf too. If you like if you prefer flat leaf parsley, that's fine too. Um, I've just liked it I've liked the curly leaf just more like aesthetically, I guess, for design. Okay. So yeah, like I said, this is a garden I did. I love this garden. I love it. And what on the left-hand side, what we did all in there is a lot of pollinator plants. So these are all good for bees, butterflies, birds, stuff like that. And so this is like this is what I'm saying when I'm saying when you think of your garden, really thinking about creating an ecosystem, because this just ends up sort of everything sort of supporting each other, and you don't have to spray as much for insects and whatnot. I have a dear friend of mine who has a yard in Santa Rosa with several fruit trees and roses, which fruit trees and roses can arguably be the most sort of sprayed stuff in the garden, like, horticulturally. for bugs and diseases. And they decided several years ago to stop spraying and to start integrating pollinator plants in their garden. And it took a shift of a few years, to be honest, but they don't spray at all now. There's no sprays. So the idea is just creating, like I said, that ecosystem and having that natural, um, balance happening. Um, okay, so my other hat that I wear in Sloat is a container designer, container design expert. I plant hundreds of containers. And so I had to do a shout out for containers, but absolutely, containers are a design element that you can add to your garden. And it's so easy, and you can put edibles in them. So almost every edible that I can think of can be grown in a container. And it's a great way to just tuck in here and there. On the picture on the far left, I designed that. I did those containers and we did the citrus in it, which is great. And it's underplanted with oregano and parsley and chives. And then the two planters next to it are all filled with pollinator plants and stuff like that. So integrating edibles in. The middle picture is not mine, but I wanted to find this because I've done this before and it's very cute and can be a design element, but just doing simple lettuce bowls and having them sort of set around your garden, I think could be a very sweet design element, especially if it's something like a blue bowl or, like a red bowl or something like that, and they're at different heights throughout your garden. It could be a really fun design element. When I did this in my garden, I mean, I've probably harvested the lettuce 3 times. And so it's not a one and done thing. You can have, it can go for a bit. And then actually the picture on the right I did with Dan. I don't know if he remembers. We did that class together, but that's a tree tail, I think, that I put in that pot. And so just like I said, it can be like you can integrate these edibles into your container. It can be a design element, but then it's also functional too. And they're movable. So you can shift them around, if you need to for the sun, or if you want to change up your space and whatnot. I think that they're a really fun ad.
That tree collard, which is
Collar, that's it.
the tall one with the purple leaf, that is still alive.
Mhm.
After all the rest of the vegetables, more annual vegetables, finished off, I took the tree collard out and put it in a separate pot, and it's about 6 feet tall and many, many branches. And I've taken a few cuttings off of it and made more tree collards out of that one. Um,
I
so
love that. I didn't know that. That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, yeah.
That's so cool. Awesome. I'll have to look at it next time I'm at the store. I think that might be it. Is it? Okay. Yeah, it is. Good. We're perfect. I did want to bring up a couple resources. Obviously, Sloat Gardens. We've got one, we have a ton of videos. We definitely check out our video library. But there's also handouts on there. Like I sent you the links to a couple resource handouts. There's a lot more information that's accessible on our website. Golden Gate Gardening is really sort of the Bible for edible gardening in the Bay. And Pam just came out with a new edition, which we're really excited about, and we do have it at Sloat. So definitely pick up a copy of that because it's got incredible information. And then I did want to shout out Homegrown National Parks, which both Dan and I did do a class with Doug Tallamy. He's incredible. Everybody should check out his sort of mission that he's doing. But the idea is just sort of maximizing the space for native pollinators and and not having these sort of monocrops, but having this sort of variety within a garden that creates this ecosystem and stuff. And so I just wanted to put those out as resources. I'm really glad everybody joined today. I'm happy to take any questions.
I've been answering a few along the way here, but just typing in answers. And let's see if anybody has any other questions, put them in the Q&A real quick. And we will, oh, here we go. There's one. Let's see. The book link and name. The name of the book is in that second. I don't know if that's a link. I guess it probably isn't. But Pam Pierce, and notice the way she spells her last name, P-E-I-R-C-E, is a little unusual. Complete Guide, Golden Gate Gardening. The new edition has quite a bit more information for people
East Bay.
in the East Bay, South Bay, that the original editions didn't have. So it's worth getting the new edition if you're in those areas. And it's really encyclopedic about growing different vegetables and has a lot of good recipes in it as well. Let's see, we have another
It's
one.
true. And we do have a video of, we did interview Pam a couple of times through Sloat. So you can definitely look up that video. She's awesome. So
Do blueberries play well with camellias?
I would think so.
Sure, why not?
Yeah.
No, they are both acid lovers, meaning they prefer an acidic soil, and the blueberries, as Jen said, can take partial shade, and camellias can take quite a bit of sun as long as and they both like to be watered,
Mm-hmm.
so they should do well together. Another question, will any marigolds work, or are some more helpful to ward off pests from my veggies?
I would, do you know? I mean, I think they're all the marigolds. Is there better ones? I don't know.
Yeah, marigolds do two things. One is they're rather heavily scented, and so
Yeah.
they confuse the bugs that are driven by the scent of certain edibles. They also, not as important here, their roots give off chemicals that repel certain kinds of nematodes in the soil, but we don't really have those around here that we have to worry about. Uh, Marigolds are also edible, a little bit odd flavored, but they're certainly
Mhm.
make a nice decoration in your salad. And if you can find more single marigolds that aren't just a ball of petals, um, that'll be more attractive for pollinators, but that's a little hard to find these days. Most marigolds have been developed into these completely double flowers. So it's really just the scent of the marigold itself that's doing the work. I'll give a shout out for alyssum. Um,
Yes.
Alyssum is probably the number one good bug attractor that you can put in your garden. And it's so easy to grow and be white or kind of purplish. But putting alyssum between your plants, around your plants, in your pots, is a great idea. And let's see. Oh, here's a couple more. Uh, is there a problem with moss in San Francisco lately? Um, I don't know that we're experts on where the moss grows, but it was such a wet winter that I would think, yes, probably. I know I'm in Fairfax where it's nice and warm, and I have moss in the areas that are shady all the time. So I think that's just a function of how wet it was. And it'll go away as things dry out. I don't. generally
It
speaking.
doesn't kill the plant or any, it's like living on the plant.
Right. If
Yeah,
it's on a tree or something like that, it's not a parasite.
it's not a
Or if
parasite.
it's on on your bricks or on the ground, it'll go away as things dry out. Uh,
Mhm.
do you know if Sloat Garden Centers are accepting applications for jobs?
Yes, always.
Yes, go to the website. You'll find the application there, I believe, or go to your nearest store, the one that would be convenient for you to work, and get an application there and take it back. And if that store isn't hiring, they'll pass it on to one that is.
Hmm.
What can you grow in the ground with Petaluma's clay soil? Oh, Petaluma clay soil. Oh, this is a
Mm.
clay soil in San Geronimo Valley.
Ooh,
Well,
how much sun?
yeah, how much? So let's assume it's sunny.
Hmm.
Um, and you know what you need to do with that clay soil is amend it with organic matter.
Hmm.
Uh, and that's basically compost, maybe a little bit of manure, but mostly compost, leafy stuff that's been broken down. Um, and uh, and depending on how high your water table is in your particular location, if your water table is really high, you might not be able to grow much during the winter because things are just standing in water. But as it recedes, when the rainy season ends, um, and the soil dries out enough that you can work it, add a bunch of organic matter, and then the leafy vegetables should do very well in that setting. Lettuces, kale, chard, oregano, um,
Hmm.
and a little later in the season, this isn't the time right now, but in August, try brassicas, broccoli, cabbages, Brussels sprouts, that sort of thing should do fine. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, I just, if Dan and I could really just echo 100, like soil is so critical to the overall health of your garden, and we've done so many classes on soil. It's definitely more. I've been doing design for 20 years, and what I say at every consultation is 70% of the stuff is this, 70% of the garden is the stuff you don't see. It's the soil, the fertilizer, and the water. And so there's no point in throwing in a bunch of new plants if you're not paying attention to all of that stuff. So making sure that you're amending your soil, adding compost to your soil every year. The irrigation needs to be assessed every year. And you got to fertilize the plants. So yeah, I agree with what Dan said with the soil and the plant choices.
Elizabeth adds only 5 or 6 hours of sun in the San Geronimo Valley, but if
Mm,
that's 5 or 6 hours during the middle of the day, that's fine.
that's
That's
good.
full sun. Uh,
Hmm.
and even when you have fog, we consider it full sun. If it's if it's 5 or 6 hours, if it were a clear day, then that's full sun.
Yeah,
Great.
also if that's your only sunspot, you can plant stuff in the ground like Dan was saying, but say you wanted to do something like a tomato that definitely needs better drainage, you can use, I should have had a picture of it, but there's those what are they called? Those wool pots. What are those called?
The fiber pots,
It's
yeah,
fiber or no, yeah, and it's like a cloth.
they're called yeah, it's a fabric.
Yeah,
It's made of plastic, but it's a woven
recycled. Yeah.
recycled plastic, drains really well, and plants seem to love growing in them. Yeah.
So you
But
can set that on top of your soil, and have your whatever in there that needs better drainage. And then around it, you can plant in the soil too. So you can really maximize that sunspot if that's your only little, slice of sun.